Hello everybody, welcome back. This is another BSJ hero guide. I've been trying to do them every 5,000 subscribers on YouTube. However, it's been a bit, we've fallen behind a bit because I'm going to just be honest. I want to thank all of you and say that the growth of the YouTube channel very recently has been quite substantial, and I usually was gaining 3 or 4,000 subscribers a month, and right now I've been gaining like 12,000 for the last month or so. So this has been pretty hype for me. It's a really good problem to have, but I also can't be making 2 or 3 guides a month. So in the future, after I do these guides to catch up, I will be doing a guide every 10,000 subs. Just want to point that out to you guys. But our next guide will be for Spectre.
Banana slam jam.
So Spectre, right now, at the current moment I am recording this, is one of the most broken heroes in the patch. And I want to emphasize to all of you that she's probably going to be nerfed. And just like she was broken at TI8, she will come back again. And the beauty of these guides is that I'm going to talk about the concepts of the hero, and I'm actually going to avoid a lot of specific item builds and strategies in this meta, and more so talk about how I view Spectre as a hero. Because the cool thing about Spectre is that she's one of the heroes that I traditionally struggled to play. I really had no idea how to make myself impactful as a Spectre. And I think what I can talk about today can actually hopefully avoid that situation for you guys. Just to be very clear, if you're wondering, BSJ, was it really that bad for you? Let's look at my Spectre recent game history. My recent game history is 15-5. The last 5 months or so, I've had a great run on Spectre. And to be very clear, I've really only picked Spectre in the past when she was OP because I don't really like the hero. I only play her because she's good. And let's look at my overall win rate. Let's remove the 15-5. I was 32 out of 58. 32 and 58 on Spectre. That is approximately a 35% win rate. That is atrocious, chat, and people watching on YouTube. That is atrocious. And I think this speaks heaps and bounds about a hero that is outside of your playstyle, or a hero like Spectre, for me, that just didn't click. And how, if you can understand the concepts of the hero, the thought process, approach to a hero, it can make a large difference. And that's what I'm going to aim for in all of my hero guides. And in this one specifically as well, especially because the patch we're on right now is currently coming to an end. Spectre may not be relevant there, but she will be relevant again, and I will be referencing this video. And if you're one of those people that's in the future down the road, TI12, if that ever occurs, and Spectre's broken again, I want to promise you that whatever I'm about to say here is relevant. So let's talk about Spectre. Spectre is a hero that it feels like if nothing goes wrong, you win the game. Now you may say, BSJ, that's a weird thing to say. If you compare that to like an Ursa, I feel like on Ursa, I have to be running at people constantly. And I have to be being aggressive, getting kills, taking Roche, forcing objectives. On Spectre, I feel like if nobody takes any objectives, everyone in the game is farming. Eventually, I get to push R and I win the game. So the way Spectre works is that she's a hero whose entire playstyle in the laning stage, as well as in the game, is all about preventing the opponent from getting whatever they want out of the map, whatever they want out of the lane, etc. She is a sustaining, trading, if you hit me and I hit you, but neither of us is dying full to 0, she's going to win. That's the nature of dispersion and the items that Spectre likes to buy. Damage from dispersion, you're reflecting at max level, at least during this patch, 22% of the damage done to you. That means for every 100 damage done to you, you're taking 78 and you're dishing out 22. So effectively, when it comes to trading, when you think about the damage numbers, if that guy hits you for 100, he's taking 22 and you're taking 78. So the net gain for him is actually 56. So you're effectively trading about twice as effective against any hero in the game of similar armor values or magic resistance values to you. Because the way dispersion works is that the damage is reflected in the form of the type of damage you took. So if you're taking physical damage, it's reflected as physical. If you're taking magical damage, it's reflected as magical, and so on. So Dispersion is one of the best trading abilities in the game. That goes in the lane, that goes in team fights, that goes in the, while you're farming around the map. And that's really important to understand on Spectre. None of her kit actually helps her kill people. Yes, Dispersion helps keep her alive. Yes, Desolate does damage to targets who are by themselves. Yes, Spectral Dagger is a slow. And also Haunt helps you be at fights from anywhere on the map. But let's be honest, do any of these abilities allow you to solo kill anybody? Do any of these abilities allow you to make plays? Other than some maybe dodgy survivability plays you can make with Spectral Dagger in the trees. Other than that, there's really no fancy plays you can make on Spectre. So that's why Spectre is a hero that comes to the conclusion that as long as nothing significant happens to me that is wrong, where I lose a bunch of towers early, I die a bunch in the early game in the laning stage, I'm going to win the game. Because if my hero's kit is allowed to be used over time, I'm spamming daggers, I'm allowed to fight only with Haunt, my Dispersion's going into full effect without me getting bursted full to 0, I'm hitting targets with Desolate, I'm going to win. Because eventually my raw stats are just going to outscale everyone in the game. But the time where that doesn't happen is when you're losing all map control. You don't have equal farm or about the same farm as the opponent heroes in the game because they've taken more map control. And so the thing about Spectre is a lot of her items are about not only trading better, meaning like she has more health, effective HP, but she's also about buying items that eventually allow her to kill people. Because as we've talked about, in order to carry the game, you must be able to clear waves efficiently. Spectre does that pretty decently with Dagger and Dispersion. You must be able to do it survivably. She usually does that pretty well, especially when she eventually gets a Manta. You need to be able to represent solo kill threat. That's where those items come into play. And then you need to be able to end the game. And Spectre's one of the best game enders in the game because she's one of the hardest heroes to go on. She usually requires an Aegis in order to end the game because it's usually possible to all in a Spectre once. It's usually impossible to do it twice because of the sheer amount of damage you take while you're trying to kill her. And a lot of her items that are the luxury items, the ideal items, are items that make you take more damage by her simply existing. Blade Mail, Radiance come into mind. Items that make her tankier, so you'll just take more damage. Scotty, Heart of Tarask, BKB. These things that keep her alive will naturally make her deal more damage as well. So the beauty about Spectre, we're going to start over from the beginning of the game now, is that her entire idea is to basically not get all in full to 0, and over time she will eventually sustain. So in the current patch, a lot of players are building items like Double Ring of Regen and a Quelling Blade, or they're going early stat items and then rushing the Ring of Tarask. And then they're just going straight Blade Mail Radiance. Or they're seeing Blade Mail Manta. An item that will always be popular on Spectre is Manta. Manta on Spectre is an amazing item. Not only because it helps you farm because you're moving faster, you attack faster, all that kind of stuff. It makes you do more damage because your illusions get desolate. And then it also makes you more survivable. So it does every job you'll ever want in the game. I can't really fathom a game on Spectre that I wouldn't want a Manta at some point. If it's Blade Mail Radiance Manta, if it's Drums Manta, there's all types of builds that you will see in the future. We've seen Manta Diffusal. We've seen Drums. We've seen Blade Mail. I've even seen Hood on Spectres. I've seen Midas. There's a lot of items that you can potentially buy on Spectre, but this concept of how she wants to play the game will always reign true. She is a hero that finds herself almost always in the dead lane. She finds herself always playing this dodge game. If your team's the one that's looking to take fights, you play away from wherever that's going to happen unless you have no haunt. If the enemy team's the one that's looking to take fights, you play away from whatever objective they're going to go for, utilizing all of the knowledge and preaching that I've given about what objectives matter to which team and when. And that's how Spectre likes to be played. The cool thing is she's an on and off switch in the game. She likes to play away from her team when she has haunt. She usually will gravitate a bit towards her team when she doesn't. She's a great hero, similar to Faceless Void, for practicing long cooldown ultimate and having like 2 different ways to play, because your haunt completely affects whether or not you need to be at a certain place on the map or not. So in the late game, when we're talking about objectives, whatever objective it is, if you have Haunt, you should play away from it usually. If you don't have Haunt, you need to be there. A lot of Spectres I've seen at lower MMRs, if Roche is the objective, for instance, they'll continue to stay away because they're assuming they're not supposed to fight. But the worst thing about Spectre is when the opponent is forcing objectives that you are allowing them to have when you don't have Haunt. Because almost always, once you have Haunt again, you will win the fight. That's almost always how it goes. And the way you lose a Spectre is either utilizing Haunt incorrectly so they can punish it, or just in general losing a bunch of objectives and them capitalizing on the advantage they gain because you don't have the threat of Haunt. So when we're going back to the laning stage, I know I've been flip-flopping a little bit, but let's just talk about the laning phase. Let's say 90% of games you're going for Spectral Dagger level 1. They've made it pretty cheap in mana. It's not the best level 1 skill for securing CS anymore since they nerfed the damage. But in general, it's an ability that helps you trade a little bit because it's a bit of a slow. It's a bit of an accelerant for yourself. And it's also an ability that helps you potentially secure range creeps with auto attack at the same time. Usually I'd be like auto attack dagger if I can. At the very least, I try to prevent them from denying the creeps. Secondly, you usually go for the dispersion. It just adds up so quickly. You know, we use the math for when you have max dispersion. Even level 1 dispersion, you're taking 93 and they're taking 7, so it goes from 100 to 86. That's 14% efficiency right there. That's 14% better trading. Imagine every hero in the game doing 14% less damage to you effectively in a trade. That adds up a lot. Every point in dispersion makes makes a value health regen item even better, right? Because it's not actually giving you more health, but it's giving you effective health, which makes Ring of Regens, Ring of Tarrasques, or any item like this a nice item for Spectre, because any effective HP is even better on her than it is on any other hero. So after we usually, in the current patch, we max out your dagger and max out your dispersion, because that's the broken build right now. However, back in TI8, we were seeing a lot of maxed out Desolate, potentially. There were games where you'd max out Desolate because this skill was really good. But ever since they nerfed the 1-point wonder in Desolate this patch, it's been a build where if any skill has a really weak level 1, you're inclined to not level it at all, because that 1 point you had to put in it that was really weak makes it so you have this weak point in the laning phase that you don't, you can't necessarily afford to have. So the cool thing was, as this long patch has gone on, there's been a bunch of different builds that have sparked up in popularity. At the start of the patch, Desolate was 30 damage at level 1. And the cool thing about that is people were building around Desolate. The build for Spectre was Drums into Manta. Isn't that really cool? Because all they wanted to do was be able to fight off low cooldown, and they wanted to be able to hit people really fast because you capitalize on the high damage from Desolate. And then Spectre's Desolate, as well as her dagger in the laning phase, got nerfed a lot. So what they decided to do, or people originally gave up on playing Spectre, like, oh, this hero got nerfed, you can't do the Drums Manta build anymore. Drums also got nerfed. Is that they're like, wait a minute, we can actually build around dispersion. So people started rushing Blade Mail. And we're seeing, instead of a low cooldown fighter, we've seen Blade Mail sometimes turn into Mantas, but we've also seen them turn into Radiances, right? So that's the cool part, is on any hero you're playing, whatever skill makes that hero broken at any given moment is the skill that you itemize and build around. So on Spectre right now, this is similar to Slark. I'm actually going to talk about Slark. In the past, your Pounce did damage, which gave you a lot of solo kill potential, which meant that you were going to buy a Shadow Blade in order to utilize that solo kill potential in the mid game. But now, since that doesn't do damage anymore, and Essence Shift actually benefits you from getting kills, you want to be fighting off low cooldown and be able to fight the opponent. That's why we saw the rise of like Echo Sabers and Drums and Diffusals on Slark. Because rather than being a pick-off hero, he wants to be a hero that's consistently fighting and benefiting from Essence Shift. Spectre's the same way. All of your builds will always revolve around whatever part of your kit is completely broken. And that's the cool part about Spectre, is even if you're seeing this in a future patch, if Desolate's the build that's broken, then you'll utilize that. And the cool thing is right now, in the late game, when you're looking to solo kill people and you're looking to scale, all you need to do is build the broken item. In the past, we'd see a lot of Manta Diffusals. If you remember, Diffusal was one of the best items in all of Dota in the later stages of the game, or even in the mid game. But now, in this current patch, it's Scotty and Abyssal. So that's the item that Spectre chooses to buy in order to stick on to targets. Diffusal nowadays is sometimes seen on Spectre, but very rarely. So the cool thing about Spectre is that her builds are usually pretty cookie cutter in any given patch. So if you're working on her in a patch where she's broken, you can kind of just copy paste whatever the pros are doing. Like right now, double Ring of Regen into Blade Mail, or Ring of Tarrasque into Blade Mail, and then Manta or Radiance, and then if you go Radiance, you go Manta. If you go Manta, you just go Scotty Abyssal, and then after the Manta, if you go Radiance Manta, you're going Scotty Abyssal, right? That's pretty much the build you go almost every single game on Spectre. Tread's thrown in there, maybe one Wraith Band, a Wand is usually thrown into there, and that's it. Item build for Spectre right now is very straightforward. But in the future, we have to consider items like Diffusal. We have to consider items like Drums. We have to consider items like Midas. We have to consider items like even that one patch we saw, Necrobook. All these original items, the first item is almost always a farming item. Drums was giving mana, move speed, some stats. That helped you farm. Blade Mail does damage to creeps, gives you a bit of survivability. It allows you to contest heroes on the map that you previously couldn't. BSJ, what do you mean by that? Well, this is a concept that applies to every single hero in the game, right? If we talk about walking up to a creep wave and we see the opponent carry there and they try to hit us and we hit them because we both want that farm, if Spectre has a Blade Mail, it makes her do that really well because no carry or any hero in the game wants to trade with a Spectre who has Blade Mail active, right? So Blade Mail is an item that not only speeds up your farm in the jungle, but it also may allow you to farm against heroes that previously would kill you or previously be able to push you away from the farm. These magic damage nukers like Lesh, for instance, or even just hard right clickers that the Blade Mail will then make them be scared to fight you. And that's the beauty of farming as a carry and also as Spectre, is that a lot of the game you are spending farming. Haunt is the exception. Most of the time you're not using Haunt. Most of the time Haunt will be on cooldown. And so you need to think about what's happening on the map in the meantime to make sure you're not losing too many objectives. You want to be strong on Spectre if you possibly can, but some games you just can't. Some games you are forced to cower into the jungle. Some games you are forced to basically never lane. Sometimes you can't really show up to fights at all other than using Haunt. Sometimes you can show up to every single fight without Haunt because you're just so farmed. And I think the problem I see on Spectres is ones that try to show up to fights with no farm and no Haunt. And then the other side of that is Spectres that have no Haunt, but they are incredibly farmed and they still play like they can't fight without Haunt. And I want you guys to realize it's not black and white. There are games where you can't fight even if you have Haunt. And there are games where you can fight even when you don't have Haunt. And that's really important. But the important aspect is to know that your strength is different if you have Haunt or not. And I think that's really cool, that you can learn to gauge your strength in two different scenarios of the game. So, she's also one of the best buyback heroes in the game, by the way, being that she can buy back and Haunt into the fight. So as long as you have Haunt, one of the best buyback heroes in the game, not only because you have Haunt to get right back into the fight, but also while you were dying the first time, you're usually killing people. So let's talk about one of the crucial problems Spectre deals with. That's in the form of break. Some of her worst counters are Viper, or heroes like Slark in a patch where Slark's really good because he goes for that Silver Edge. And in pubs, you're probably going to struggle with this. And the beauty of it is that Silver Edge is a very expensive item, so in those types of games, you can usually itemize a decent amount of items at that point. And against a hero like Viper, you just have to buy a BKB. So when we talk about adjusting to counters, BKB is really your only option at the current moment to deal with Silver Edge, or at least with Viper, specifically. And another hero that I consider is something like Nyx. I'd probably avoid picking Spectre in these heroes, but the fact is, when she's broken like she is now, you can probably still pick her anyway. You're just going to have to adjust, because making sure her dispersion goes off is probably the most important part of her entire kit, because the second that you're no longer dispersing, you lose so much effective health, and you're also doing no damage while you're dying. So in that case, items like BKB become potentially relevant. Even items like Ghost Scepter against Slark with a Silver Edge, anything like that that can just make it so you don't die in that break duration. Like, these are things where it's odd, but the worst thing you can allow happen to yourself as Spectre is to die in a Silver Edge or a break duration. That is the worst thing you can allow yourself to do. And when it comes to farming on the map and such, an item like Blade Mail will help you a lot, because a hero like Slark who has a Silver Edge can't necessarily kill you, because even though you're broken, you get dispersed, or you get Blade Mail damage, and that's something that can help you in that regard too. The thing I like about Spectre is that she has a magic damage build, the Radiance. Very good against all illusion carries, very good against low sustain lineups, very good against squishy range supports. That's when I love to pick Spectre. But also, you have a physical damage build in the form of like the Manta Scotty, the Manta Diffusal, and that's really good against heroes like Anti-Mage. Diffusal's really good against any elusive carries like Slark, where they can disengage your initial haunt and then loop back around and kill you. But the thing is, if that initial haunt burned all of their mana, they can't do that. So that's when Diffusal, I think, is really good on Spectre. But now let's talk about good matchups and bad matchups for Spectre. I feel like I've rattled off a bajillion things about how I think about Spectre to play the hero. The thing about Spectre is, if I lose by something happening in the game, I really hate playing against lineups that can force things to happen in the game. Really strong 5-man lineups at early on stages in the game, that's when it's really tough to play Spectre. Right now, I think one of the reasons why Spectre is even considered pretty solid is because of the way Tier 2 towers work. The fact that Tier 2 towers get fortified, kill every creep in the wave, it makes it really difficult for the opponent to efficiently group up as 5. So that means that Spectre, who early on in the game, she doesn't want to deal with that, right? So not only is it like early aura heroes, something like a Chen, something like, these Nature's Prophet aura heroes, and Nature's Prophet's not necessarily the best example because you do scale well against him. These heroes can be really annoying. But then like Underlord, for instance. But then also heroes that low cooldown push. Lycan, in patches where Spectre's good, Lycan comes into play. He's really bad this patch, so you don't see him. But Lycan's one of the best heroes against Spectre. We see Beastmaster, one of the best heroes against Spectre. Any of these heroes that threaten low cooldown push. Now, you may say BSJ and low MMRs. I don't really see Beastmaster. I don't really see Lycan. Well, why do you think Spectre feels so broken in 2K? Even more broken than she is in any other bracket. Because people don't know how to play these low cooldown push heroes. And you guys also don't know how to force the issue when you're winning. So that's why Spectre feels so good. Because I literally said if nothing happens in the game, the hero's broken. And in low brackets, you don't even have to do anything. Nothing's going to happen anyway. And that's why it feels so good to play Spectre at low brackets. She's very easy to pull off because it's not your job to do anything. It's your job to prevent the opponent from doing anything. And they don't even try to do anything. So you don't have to do anything. But the cool thing as you get better as a Spectre is utilizing the knowledge we have of the map and saying, okay, is it my job to defend the objectives that they're trying to take because I think they're going to try to poke them down? Or is it my job to play away from the objectives because I think they're going to try to group up for them? And that largely decides whether or not you're going to play the dead lane or whether or not you're going to play the aggressive lane. You're playing the dead lane when the opponent carry is something that's going to push it into you but not try to take the tower. You play the opposite lane when you think the opponent's going to group up in your dead lane and you want to play away from them. It's just that simple. That's how you decide between playing the aggressive enemy part of the map and your own side of the map. She has two different ways to play, but she doesn't create pressure. So the reason why you're playing away from the dead lane, like you're playing in the opponent's safe lane, is not because you're like a jug that's trying to take the tier 2, that you're trying to create pressure. You're just trying to push in a wave and allow yourself to farm that way. And that's the beauty about Spectre is you don't feel pressured to do anything. You just have to play according to what the opponent is doing. And if you're allowed to play your own safe lane, that is the dream. Because that means the opponent's doing absolutely nothing. And if the opponent's doing absolutely nothing, you are very happy with that. So your home should be your own safe lane. And if they force you out of that, like I said, with 5-man push or a hero that you just can't deal with, then you leave. But you should be forced to leave your own safe lane because that's where Spectre loves to be playing. She loves to be counterplaying. If all of the tier 1 towers are alive at 15 minutes for both teams, the Spectre team is winning. That is Dota. There's very few exceptions to that. So I want you to think about that with the approach you have playing Spectre on the map. The worst thing you can do, though, is show up to a tower you think you can defend and die. So I don't want to discourage you from trying to defend towers if you think you can, but it's really important that you pay attention to the fact that you don't randomly feed at towers. That's really bad. You don't want to be stuck dragging into fights that the opponent's trying to force. Because like I said, if Spectre's allowed to have Haunt and then choose to fight you, she's one of the most broken heroes in the game. So that's why heroes like Lycan, like Beastmaster, these group up early push heroes are super annoying because you may use Haunt to deter them one time, but then they'll just run back and do it again. But when it comes to scaling into the late game, I love Spectre for punishing heroes that rely on positioning. Let's talk about supports that she's very good against. She's very good against Skywrath Mage, against heroes like Wyvern that like to sit in the back and ult your teammates and save your teammates. Dazzle, Oracle. Shadow Demon, not necessarily Shadow Demon as much because he can be aggressive on you, but the point is Spectre is amazing at disrupting opponent synergies. She's not only amazing against saves and counter players, but she's amazing against counter initiators like Magnus, like Earthshaker. I'd say those are the two that really stand out to me as heroes that she's amazing against. I want you to think that the opponent has all these buttons they want to push in quick succession. They have heroes that want to use abilities on each other, and those heroes are position-based, whether or not they're Blink Dagger initiators like Earthshaker and Magnus. Another one I throw into the equation is Axe, but they're also heroes that are squishy, like the Oracles and the Wyverns, because at that point, the minute you push R, they're just going to fucking die. The heroes I don't like picking her against are ones that just play up in your face anyways, and they're perfectly fine to stand right next to their team anyways. Heroes like Ogre, Undying. Makes sense? Good talk. She also doesn't really like playing against heroes that kind of just walk down lanes. Something like a Bristleback, something like a Slardar, something like a Tidehunter. She doesn't love it. Could she play against those heroes? Sure, but that's not what she likes playing against, because those heroes, the whole point of Spectre is she can jump heroes that previously couldn't get jumped no matter what position she's in. She loves playing against cores like Tinker, like Drow, like Lena, like Nature's Prophet, like Zeus. These are the heroes that Spectre loves to play against. And you got to have at least one or two of them, because the idea is if you have these supports you're playing against or these squishy cores you're playing against, you have a very clear person that you're going to kill when you haunt. It's nice to have this idea of who I want to kill, who I want to go on when I'm going to use my haunt. And if I'm thinking about that ahead of time, based on not only in the draft, but something I can reestablish at the beginning of the game for myself, that'll make my execution of skills very easy. Now, I want people to understand, Haunt is very rarely, or at least not ideally, used as a counter-initiation method. It is used as a follow-up to your teammates going in. That is the dream way to use Haunt, and that's the way you should want to use it every single game. So one thing Spectre can really struggle with is if her team has no reliable initiation. That is something that if they don't have, Spectre has a hero is going to be very difficult to play because you're forced to basically use your Haunt defensively every single time. So the way I look at it is I want a Batrider offlane. I want a Sand King offlane. I want a Beastmaster, an Axe, a Legion. I want something like a Storm Spirit mid, a Void Spirit mid, an Ember Spirit mid. I want somebody who's going to go the fuck in, start a fight, and then I push R. That's how I want to play. And if my offlaner is something like a Bristleback and my mid laner's something like a Queen of Pain, that makes the game real fucking awkward because nobody's stunning people and nobody's going in. I don't want to pick Spectre in those types of games because it becomes very reliant upon the opponent messing up and overextending as opposed to your team being able to make plays. I always want my team to be able to make plays when I'm Spectre because that gives me a very obvious moment that I want to haunt. When it comes to carry matchups, I think some of her worsts are heroes like Anti-Mage, ones that can disengage from the haunt, but also threaten her while she's farming. Heroes like Slark, Faceless Void can be kind of wishy, like one way or the other, depending upon the heroes in the game. Like if Faceless Void is relying on a bunch of follow-up, Spectre disrupts that really well. But if Faceless Void is just strong at grouping up with his team, that's a little bit different. Spectre may look to struggle there. Terrorblade's a matchup that's gone back and forth, but Manta's a great way to solve that matchup. Matchups like Jug, where he sustains his entire team. Heroes like Lycan that push her. Heroes like PA that benefit from her early passivity, where they benefit from that window of like 10 to 15 minutes where nothing's happening in the game. And a hero like PA can just farm a Battle Fury and then, be 6-slotted by 30 minutes into the game. So even though both of you have good farm, she'll farm faster than you and she can actually kill you. Heroes like PL, I like to pick her against. Any hero that Radiance completely fucks, I love picking Spectre against. Obviously, Viper. Heroes like Medusa that are difficult to fight into can be quite bad matchups as well. I also like her against heroes that restrict mobility. Heroes that rely on going on you and you having to be running away. Like Bloodseeker, like Puck. I personally love Spectre in those games. It's not always the best. Sometimes it's hard to be able to survive through that kind of stuff. But it is my dream as Spectre for them to throw a bunch of abilities on me and just have me stand still. That is what I love. I love being able to just stand still after they chuck a bunch of abilities on me. However, I don't want to pick her against Puck if I'm also against some ridiculously hard right-clicker like Terrorblade or Anti-Mage that could kill me in the duration of the time that I'm stuck standing still. Heroes she scales really well against, we already mentioned Drow, Clinks, Arc Warden, Luna, all these ranged heroes that just can't afford to have a Spectre in their face, but also don't necessarily force the issue fast enough to end the game. Drow's a bit of an exception because she can help her team early push. So that's a matchup where if there's a window Drow can hit, she can absolutely capitalize on it. Spectre Ags, it's an interesting item to consider. As of right now, it allows you to haunt onto one person on a 35-second cooldown. You do have to have vision of them. So it's an item that can be very nice in the late game if you want to be able to help your team get ganks. But I would say it's mainly an item for like 45 minutes plus, where the whole point is the game's a little bit stagnated, and the only way to really move forward with winning is to kill somebody that's alone while they're split pushing. So that's when I'll go for Ags on Spectre. What about Spectre versus like Alk and Sven? I don't like Spectre versus Alk. Alk is the same idea as a hero like PA or Anti-Mage, where they capitalize on that early passivity from the Spectre trying to make the game have nothing happen. However, if you have other heroes that are good against these heroes, Spectre owns them, because Spectre's a carry that can participate in the fights from global range. So if Alk's dealing with like an offlane Timbersaw or something like that that counters the Alk, then it's a very good time to pick Spectre, because you're a carry that farms just like the Alk, but your team can set up kills where you can actually help them get the kills. So a lot of those matchups, these greedy heroes, are not actually decided by Spectre. Same with Sven. Sven's the same idea. If your team can run at Sven and shut him down, Spectre's quite nice against Sven. However, if Sven's allowed to absolutely free farm, then he's going to get items faster than you do. So in that case, Spectre's not so hot against Sven. And Sven also, at least right now with the Ags, has an ability that can allow him to initiate fights without a blink, but also from long range. Heroes that I love picking into Spectre are heroes that would previously struggle against lane-dominating carries. This is offlaners, excuse me. Against lane-dominating carries that now get to free farm because they're against a Spectre. My personal favorite is actually Sand King. Now, you may not believe me, but at least in the current meta or any other meta where Spectre relies on dispersion, all you need to do is build items that allow you to sustain through your own damage. So I've learned my favorite hero is actually Sand King with a hood, and you just bully the Spectre away from lane with Sandstorm and Caustic. And then you build an Ags because you're a hero that doesn't rely on blink initiation, and you're also a hero that can disengage from the haunt. Notice how I'm not always going to give you guys specific heroes. I'm going to give you characteristics of heroes that are nice against Spectre. Hard commitment heroes are very hard to play against Spectre, because if you overextend at any given moment, the game can be incredibly punishing, and you might just lose on the spot. Heroes like Tiny, heroes like Axe, heroes like Ursa, these heroes can potentially struggle against Spectre, Troll Warlord, because if they pop their round of abilities and then Spectre haunts, they'll probably lose. Heroes that can make Spectre waste her haunt and then still fight at full capacity are the ones I love picking. Like I said, Anti-Mage, PA, Slark, Slardar, Sand King, low cooldown, pretty high mobility. They can punish the Spectre if she's alone, but can also disengage or initiate around the Spectre haunt. Those are the heroes you want to play. The other option is just to have so many heroes that ball up and be unkillable, just like a nice 5-man tanky lineup, that makes it hard for Spectre to play the game. Necro is another example of an offlaner that kind of fits the same description as Sand King. Can bully the Spectre away. Current patch, Necro's really bad, but he would fit a description of the type of hero I would look to pick against Spectre. I talked about which supports Spectre's good to pick against, but when it comes to Spectre, not only do you want reliable initiation, which could either come from the supports or the offlaners, but it's also really nice to have some punishment for when the opponent wants to group and 5-man kill the Spectre. Because like I said, the only thing that goes wrong for Spectre at any given moment in the game is she dies full to 0 very quickly. That is the only way she can really lose fights for the most part. So obviously the most notable one is Warlock. Not only does he have the Fatal Bonds that benefits from all the AoE damage that Spectre's doing, but he will heavily punish anybody that tries to 5-man commit onto the Spectre. We're talking about Wyvern. We're talking about Warlock. These heroes not only have heals that benefit from the dispersion that I talked about earlier, but they also have counter initiation measures and also decent initiation measures that she can maybe capitalize on herself. Treant Protector, IO, all these heals, sustains, oracles, counter initiations, coddles. These are the heroes. Silencers, shadow demons. You want to be able to make it so the opponent can't win the fight before Spectre haunts, and then after they go on her, she just haunts. That's what you need to be able to do. Or make it so that your team reliably initiates on the opponent. The cool thing is you can usually have both. You can have like a Warlock 5 position and then like a Bat Rider or a Sand King offlane. These are the perfect types of synergies with Spectre, a reliable way to start the fight and a response if the opponent 5-mans the Spectre. Because when you have a Spectre, somehow a point I have not talked about, because the nature of haunt, the opponent will almost always try to hunt the Spectre, because it feels very unappealing to go on anyone that isn't the Spectre, because you're just going to get haunted. So even though you're this super tanky dispersion damage dealing hero, the opponent actually wants to go on you because of that. So the two types of games where Spectre struggles are the ones where they can burst her full to 0, or games where her haunt is not enough of a threat damage-wise to be a deterrent to going on someone else. That's when Spectre becomes a bad hero. I would say the best 4s to lane against Spectre are ones that prevent her from winning the sustain battle that I talked about her being so good with. The Linas, the Rubiks, these heroes that hit you a lot, you don't necessarily threaten them. Mirana is actually one of the best 4 positions in all the game against Spectre. Why, BSJ? Why? Because I said what's so good against Spectre is the ability to disengage from haunt. No, what better to disengage from haunt than 5 heroes that are invisible? Spectral Dagger does show you where invis heroes are. It will chase them and follow them as long as it's on them. The thing about Spectral Dagger is it doesn't reveal them, like you can't hit them, but it does tell you where they are. An example of an interesting interaction with this is that if you Spectral Dagger Slark, he's actually technically revealed and he doesn't get his ultimate regen or move speed, but you cannot see them and hit them, but you know where they are. Wind Ranger is one of the worst 4 positions. I actually love Spectre against Wind Ranger. Hardest counter to Wind Ranger in the entire game. A cool mechanic I did not tell you guys about is that Desolate cannot miss. So if you're hitting people against evasion, it's actually beautiful to have Desolate as long as you're getting the proc. The attack itself can miss, but the Desolate damage itself cannot miss. And then a hero like Wind Ranger, it's so good against her because she's a position-based hero that survives based on Wind Run, which is evasion, and she also relies on bursting a hero and she can just die to Blade Mail. So Spectre is very good against Wind Ranger for that reason. That's an example of a matchup Spectre loves to play. Spectre is absolutely a carry that can solo carry the game. She doesn't solo carry the game by forcing objectives. She solo carries the game by preventing the opponent from ever getting objectives and then eventually just outscaling everybody around the 40-minute mark and then just killing everybody with R. She's actually not a carry that usually wants to go 78 minutes into the game, 70, 80 minutes into the game, because at that point the supports all have like Ghost Scepters, Glimmers, Force Staffs, Yule Scepters, and all these items to help them live, Eon Discs. You want to catch this like crucial 40-minute window-ish where Spectre is strong enough to fight the other cores, and she can also just solo kill all the supports. I don't necessarily want to talk too much about her talents because I have a feeling they'll be reworked, but I would say you pretty much always take stats. You don't need health regen unless you're a noob. I'd pretty much always take the Spectral Dagger cooldown. It's just way too good. I would almost always take the health, but I have seen some people take the dagger slow and bonus, I would say you lean towards taking the health. And then you always take the dispersion. They're probably going to remove that talent, I have to believe. But I would always take the dispersion. It's not only survivability, it's also damage, and it's something that applies at all stages of the game rather than haunt, which is only during your haunt itself. So Spectre has one mode and one mode only. She's on the defensive, preventing the opponent from getting objectives. If you have a good game, maybe you'll be able to trade objectives, or maybe you'll actually be able to defend the objectives yourself. If you have a bad game, you play away from the opponent's objectives. It's just that simple. Spectre is one of the best Roshan takers in all of Dota. Ever since they made it so Desolate works on Roshan, utilizing your Manta to hit Roshan actually kills it very fast. Ever since they allowed illusions to hit Rosh and they made Desolate work on Rosh, she became a very fast Roshan taker. So that is one of the few objectives that you can try to force as a Spectre. The time that you want to buy Radiance on Spectre is not only against illusion-based heroes or AoE heroes that you need to deal with AoE, but it's largely dependent upon what I exactly said Spectre struggles with. She struggles with the ability of the opponent to force objectives when she doesn't have Haunt, and the ability of the opponent to take map control because she can't fight back. All Radiance does is extend that window because you're weaker. You're about to hit this massive timing. So there's two conclusions you have to come to in order to buy a Radiance. One, even if you bought other items, you wouldn't be able to fight them. An example would be PL. You need the Radiance to be able to fight him in the first place. And two, you are worried that the opponent can capitalize on the time it takes you to get a Radiance and kill all of your buildings and the rest of your team as well. Last point I'll make is the time that you need to consider how impactful your Haunt usage is. And it's not in the sense of how much you'll get done with Haunt. I want you guys to realize that it's a combination of how much you'll get done with Haunt, but also how much the opponent can do when you utilize your Haunt. When you use your Haunt, are people be able to just walk into Rosh? Are they able to just take your tier 3s, fight your team without you? What are the negative impacts that you will feel while your Haunt is on cooldown? That should help you determine whether or not you're willing to go for solo kills or anything like that, because the main drawback of going for like solo kills with Haunt and all that kind of stuff is that the opponent can simply run over your objectives and the rest of your team because you don't have the threat of Haunt. So that's a lot about gauging how powerful of a threat and a deterrent is my Haunt in the first place. And in that case, I may be discouraged to use it until the opponent's like 5-manning and I need to use it. I wouldn't use it unless I absolutely have to. In games where the opponent has really no objective taking, I'm very happy to just solo kill somebody with a Haunt, accelerate my farm, because I know during the time it's on cooldown, I'll just be farming anyways, and they're not going to be able to stop me from doing that. Thanks for watching, everybody. That is the Spectre Guide, and I hope you guys learned a lot, and best of luck in your Spectre games.